The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine remains a focal point in international news, recognized as one of the most severe and significant wars of our era. To gain a comprehensive understanding of the current situation, it is essential to revisit the origins of this conflict and subsequently analyze the most recent updates, the human costs, the economic repercussions, and the geopolitical changes that this war has instigated. The large-scale invasion started on February 24, 2022, when Russian troops entered Ukraine from various directions: north from Belarus, east from Russia, and south from Crimea. The official aim from Moscow was a so-called special military operation to demilitarize Ukraine and stop its alignment with NATO. However, the true intention was to quickly topple Ukraine's government and set up a pro-Russian regime. In the initial weeks, Russian forces moved swiftly, even reaching the outskirts of Kyiv. Many experts believed Ukraine would fall within days. But the outcome surprised everyone. Ukraine resisted with remarkable strength, halting Russia's progress and ultimately forcing them to withdraw from northern Ukraine by April 2022. From that moment on, the conflict moved towards the east and south. Russia focused its military efforts in the Donbass and southern areas such as Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. At the same time, Ukraine initiated counteroffensives in late 2022, reclaiming substantial territory, including the city of Kyiv. However, as the conflict continued into 2023 and 2024, both factions entrenched themselves. The front lines became more rigid, resulting in a static battlefield where advancements are measured in meters rather than kilometers. Trench warfare made a comeback in Europe, a phenomenon not seen since World War I, now integrated with modern technologies like drones, precision missiles, and electronic warfare systems. By 2025, the situation has escalated into a war of attrition with no definitive resolution in sight. Russian forces persist in their efforts to make advances employing extensive artillery bombardments and airstrikes, while Ukraine depends on precision weapons supplied by the West to strike Russian supply depots and command centers located far from the front lines. The toll of this extended conflict is immense. Civilians are bearing the brunt of the suffering. The United Nations has reported that July 2025 marked the deadliest month in over 2 years, with at least 1,674 civilian casualties, which include 286 fatalities and 1,388 injuries. These statistics are not mere figures. They signify families ripped apart, children left without parents, and communities devastated. The majority of these casualties resulted from explosive munitions such as artillery shells, glide bombs, and drones aimed at populated regions. The displacement crisis is equally critical. Nearly 6.9 million Ukrainians are currently refugees in various countries spread throughout Europe and beyond. Poland, Germany, and several other European nations accommodate millions, which puts pressure on their social systems, yet they continue to offer assistance. Within Ukraine, approximately 3.7 million individuals are still internally displaced, residing in temporary accommodations or relocating from one hazardous area to another. Humanitarian organizations project that 12.7 million people in Ukraine will need urgent help in 2025, whether it be food, shelter, medical care, or psychological support. Picture entire communities depending on aid convoys due to the absence of local infrastructure. This is the stark reality faced on the ground. Economically, Ukraine is relying on international financial aid to survive. The economy fell by more than 30% in 2022, then showed a slight recovery, but growth is still weak. The World Bank forecasts that Ukraine will achieve only about 2% GDP growth in 2025, provided the war does not worsen and aid continues. Without outside help, the economy would completely collapse. To ensure stability, Ukraine entered a 4-year agreement with the International Monetary Fund, called the Extended Fund Facility. By June 2025, the IMF had provided $10.6 billion through this program, enabling the Ukrainian government to maintain essential services paying teachers, doctors, and pensions, while also bolstering currency reserves. On the military front, support from the West has been crucial for Ukraine's resistance. Since the start of the invasion, the United States has given over $66.5 billion in security aid. which includes some of the most advanced weaponry available: Patriot missile batteries, Nasom's air defense systems, HIMARS long-range rocket systems, precision artillery shells, and armored vehicles. This support also includes comprehensive training programs for Ukrainian forces and real-time intelligence sharing. NATO allies together committed more than 35 billion euros in military aid just in 2025. And this amount is likely to increase. Nations like Germany have supplied Leopard tanks, while the United Kingdom has provided Storm Shadow missiles, and other allies have contributed air defense systems that are essential for safeguarding cities against missile and drone strikes. Despite this, Ukraine is facing huge challenges. There are ongoing ammunition shortages, and fighting a modern war against a much bigger opponent like Russia is very difficult. At the same time, Russia has called up hundreds of thousands of extra troops since 2022. It has changed its economy into what many experts refer to as a war economy, where a large part of industrial production is focused on making weapons and military gear. Factories operate continuously to produce artillery shells, drones, and armored vehicles. Russia has also brought in many drones from Iran and is said to have obtained artillery shells from North Korea. This increases Russia's dependence on a network of countries that are willing to ignore Western sanctions, while also highlighting the global aspect of this conflict. The sanctions placed by the United States, the European Union, and other nations are among the most severe ever enforced. They focus on Russia's banking system, advanced technology sectors, energy exports, and individuals associated with the Kremlin. As a result, Russia has had to seek new trade routes and partners, particularly in Asia. Currently, Russia sells a significant portion of its oil to China and India at lower prices, which helps sustain its revenue for the war. Nevertheless, these actions have cut Russia off from Western markets and technology, slowly diminishing its long-term economic outlook. The technological side of this conflict is unlike anything seen before. Drones are prevalent on the battlefield, used for both surveillance and as loitering munitions that can accurately hit targets. Ukraine has effectively created its own drone programs and often employs unmanned systems to attack Russian oil depots and military installations deep within Russian territory. On the other hand, Russia utilizes Iranian-made Shade drones in swarms to overpower Ukrainian air defenses. Electronic warfare, satellite communications, and cyber operations are crucial components. In fact, some experts refer to this as the first major drone war in history, paving the way for future conflicts globally. Civilians are the primary victims of this technological arms race. Each new wave of missile or drone strikes devastates homes, schools, and hospitals. Ukraine's power grid is consistently targeted. During the winter months, assaults on energy infrastructure left millions without heat or electricity, while international allies have supplied generators and mobile energy systems. These alternatives cannot entirely substitute for a functioning national grid. Schools have shifted to hybrid models, conducting classes online when feasible, but ongoing blackouts and connectivity problems pose a persistent challenge for students. The diplomatic landscape remains stagnant. Numerous attempts at peace negotiations have been unsuccessful. Russia demands acknowledgement of territories it claims to have annexed, while Ukraine stands firm against conceding any of its land. Both parties are convinced they can enhance their military positions, complicating the possibility of compromise. In the meantime, NATO nations stress that any peace agreement must uphold Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Until that is achieved, military and economic assistance for Ukraine will persist. The worldwide repercussions of this conflict extend far beyond Europe. The war instigated a surge in global food and energy prices, particularly in the initial year. Ukraine stands as one of the largest grain exporters globally, and the disruption of shipping routes in the Black Sea has led to shortages in regions such as Africa and the Middle East. Although temporary agreements facilitated limited grain exports, these arrangements remain susceptible to military escalation. Additionally, energy markets experienced significant turmoil as European nations endeavored to reduce their reliance on Russian gas. Substantial investments were made by European countries in liquefied natural gas terminals, renewable energy sources, and alternative supply chains. However, these transitions require considerable time and financial resources. thereby exacerbating inflationary pressures. For the average citizens within Ukraine, the ongoing war represents an unyielding trial of resilience. Life in urban areas close to the front lines is exceedingly perilous, characterized by continuous shelling and minimal access to essential services. Even in prominent cities such as Kyiv, the presence of air raid sirens has become a daily occurrence. Numerous families are compelled to seek refuge in bomb shelters or underground metro stations during periods of attack. The prevalence of psychological trauma is alarming, with humanitarian organizations documenting a rise in cases of anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder, particularly among children. As the conflict reaches its fourth year, the extent of devastation is nearly beyond comprehension. Whole communities have been completely destroyed. The estimated cost for Ukraine's reconstruction is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And this figure only accounts for physical infrastructure. Revitalizing the economy, restoring educational systems, and mending the social fabric will require decades. For Russia, the ongoing isolation and the staggering expenses of maintaining military operations present long-term threats to its stability. Yet the leadership remains steadfast in its goals. The international community continues to observe, recognizing that this conflict has already altered the global landscape and will influence security in Europe for generations ahead.